Imagine that your son is missing. You've called his friends and they haven't seen him. You've left him a dozen messages and no response. The feeling of helplessness starts to set in. You feel empty. Your only hope is the local sheriff's office. Dozens of citizens come forward to work in search parties, but they're turned away and told to go home. No one tells you anything. You spend weeks and even months trying to get answers, but none ever come. You include his picture on a billboard for missing and murdered in your area. And then one day, less than 100 yards from where people were told they couldn't organize a search party, his body is found. Many people have asked why I'm suing Putnam County Sheriff's Office. Some people think I have some kind of personal vendetta or am out looking for money. I wanted to take this time to let you know that neither revenge nor revenue drove me to investigate the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. It's quite a complex story, and I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. The imagined experience at the introduction of this video was a very real experience for the family of Joshua Bohannon. Joshua had gone missing in 2021, and his family had done everything they could think of to find him. And the sheriff's department blocked them at every step of the way, and even banned some of them from the department without notice. When Joshua's body was found, his remains were left unrecognizable. However, the Putnam County, Tennessee Sheriff's Office knew that for a small town, finding a body was big news. They wanted to promote their hard work and diligence to the community as a publicity stunt, under the guise of keeping the community informed. So they posted about it on their official social media pages, and the post took off. Horrified, knowing that the sheriff who had done almost nothing for their family was now exploiting the situation for PR, they were left with no other options. The family took to the official Facebook page of the sheriff's department to set the record straight.
His wife did not report him missing. She already had a boyfriend at the time of his disappearance. But go ahead, keep deleting these comments.
Did you really only leave the comments up to make you look better? I've been following this case since day one, and as a mother, my heart went out to this family as they pleaded with you for help to find their son and their brother with nothing but ignored phone calls.
The first I heard about any of this was when a friend reached out and told me that the Putnam County Sheriff's Office was deleting comments. Knowing the law on social media censorship and government pages, I encouraged these individuals to reach out to the sheriff, and if that didn't work, I also informed them that they could litigate. Several people told me that they couldn't do that because they were afraid. Now, to be frank, I thought this was ridiculous.
Oh my, I'm afraid.
The individual managing the page was almost surely a low-level employee, and the sheriff himself would be far too busy to worry about retaliating over a social media issue. I took to the Putnam County Sheriff's Office page to simply ask why comments were missing. Lo and behold, that comment was deleted. Well, as some of you know, I can be quite persistent. So I commented again and encouraged the page moderator not to delete comments. I told them it was a violation of the First Amendment. In return, my comment was once again deleted, and I was now blocked from viewing the page entirely. So I went to Instagram to ask a few more questions. Bam, comments deleted there too.
None shall pass.
Within 2 days of beginning this venture, I obtained a little insight as to why there was such a chill to speech in Putnam County, Tennessee. I arrived at work one day, opened my phone, and saw this message from an obviously fake social media profile. "Hey, little bitch." Obviously a play on the nickname I'd given Little Eddie. "I'll be in touch with Coffee County to get your notary status removed. Space. I sure hope you are paying taxes on the merchandise crap you're selling and promoting. Space. Hate for the state revenue folks to find out." I informed them that I did pay my taxes and told them not to message me again. Unfortunately, the individual was even more persistent than myself, and he took to the comments section on one of my Facebook posts. Here, JT Hill made similar statements to the ones that he'd made in direct message. I was not the only person JT Hill attacked, nor the only person who believed him to be in law enforcement. JT Hill was antagonizing, threatening, and cursing almost everyone in the comments, and eventually, Facebook removed his profile entirely. Taking this as an obvious sign of political corruption, and since corruption busting is my business, I decided to seek justice. If no one else was going to stand up, I would. I began saving money, and in December 2022, I filed my own federal lawsuit over the censorship. I went on the radio and told people what had happened after I was blocked and why I felt the issue went far beyond just social media censorship.
It sounds like, just based on what you said just then, that the Putnam County Sheriff's Office attempted to intimidate you by flowing some information about your past online in an effort to almost, certainly intimidate, if not threaten you.
Soon thereafter, I was contacted by recently retired Major Terry Hembry, who had also been victimized, along with his wife. Then another victim reached out, and another. I kept digging, and I kept finding things. And now, I'm going to tell you what I've discovered. It's going to be a doozy. Years of corruption, terrible hiring practices, sketchy financial practices, sex scandals, steroids, and much, much more. Strap in.
I never thought this day would come like revelations. Heads buried in the sand, death of a nation. America's in muddy waters, with sheep to the slaughter. Submit in the bay, put on a shot collar. We know Trump is just a test for their power. We know he's the biggest threat to these fucking cowards. While they weaponize the court, do it all for the sport. They're baiting us all for a civil war. They got the ducks in a row, all the judges they know. Still you trust the regime, a traitor Joe in the hoe. And all the dark money flowing to their pockets, controlling all the profits, exposing they don't stop it. I guess treason don't apply to the powers that be, and going after all political enemies. I don't care what I'm deemed, call me based or extreme, know the truth's gonna sting, so hear my sing. Freedom's under fire from within, we're in our darkest hour. Babylon is falling while we're calling to our highest power.
Sheriff Eddie Farris, with over 25 years in law enforcement, received extensive training from institutions like the TBI, FBI, and even the United States Justice Department. Sworn in as Putnam County Sheriff in 2014, Farris emphasizes a commitment to the community's welfare and efficient law enforcement. A lifelong resident of Putnam County, he prioritizes values like courage, trustworthiness, and professionalism, promising effective law enforcement protection and quality training for the sheriff's office. Sheriff highlights fiscal responsibility, stating that the role of a sheriff is to enforce existing statutes rather than imposing new taxes. That would be your impression of Eddie Farris if all you did was read his bio on the Putnam County Sheriff's Office website. What's not included in his resume is that while working at the Tennessee Highway Patrol, Farris and several others were allegedly under investigation for selling and or using anabolic steroids.
He can say he ain't on steroids, but what he can't do is not look big as fuck on TV while he's saying it.
Task force files are not subject to open records request, but members of this task force have confirmed the existence of the investigation. Allegedly, numerous complaints had been made, and the investigation had reached the point where agents were ready to perform a controlled buy. Their efforts were suddenly and abruptly shut down after they notified local law enforcement of their intent, namely Sheriff David Andrews. The agents overseeing the investigation were forced to apologize, but no explanation was given other than loyalty to fellow law enforcement officers. Also missing from his bio is a little incident that took place after his promotion to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Multiple insiders allege that Sheriff Farris used his position in an attempt to get his daughter's then boyfriend out of a speeding ticket. Apparently, a Mr. Davis was pulled over for doing approximately 53 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone. Eddie is then said to have called the officer, we will call him Officer Smith, who issued the ticket and asked him to make it go away. Officer Smith wanted to help his fellow law enforcement officer, and in most cases would have done so, but couldn't, due to new rules in place by the judge overseeing the case. A short time later, it is said that Eddie approached the judge, Judge Ledbetter, and told him that Davis was an informant and tried to throw the officer under the bus. Officer Smith protecting his own reputation, told the judge everything. The long and the short, after a thorough investigation by the powers that be, Eddie was given a 3-day suspension and transferred to the 9th Judicial District, where he would spend his remaining time with the TBI in Roane County. Eddie was determined to come back to Putnam County, however, and in 2014 announced his run for sheriff. In August of 2014, obviously, he won. Immediately after his election, Sheriff Farris announced a slew of new hires and promotions to command staff on the official Putnam County Sheriff's Office Facebook page. Among those new hires was Major Terry Hembry. At the time, Hembry was oblivious to Sheriff Farris's corruption and thought quite highly of the man. He had no idea he would one day fall victim to the political harassment squad of the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. Before we get into the sex scandals, steroids, and more exciting things I've uncovered, it's important to understand some of the crime and budget statistics of the local area. Putnam County, Tennessee sits atop the Cumberland Plateau and is home to some of the most beautiful views Tennessee has to offer. It's in the country, but close enough to major cities to make a day trip to places like Nashville, Chattanooga, and Knoxville, or even travel out of state to Louisville or Atlanta. The population of Putnam County, Tennessee has increased about 13.5% between 2010 and 2022, and that's a large increase over a short period of time. It's understandable that a similar increase across the board would be normal. Elected unopposed, Eddie took office controlling a budget of just over $8 million. Now, his budget is over $16.3 million, meaning the budget has increased almost 100%. The inmate population has increased, at times, 100% or more.
Just to give you, when we first come into office in 14, I think our daily population was like 235, 240, and it's grown to over 400 now. And so it's putting a lot of pressure on us.
Yet, the clearance rate of drug cases has decreased as much as 40%, while the number of these cases has more than doubled, and in some years, tripled. County inmates are dying, sometimes multiple in a year, and although the cost of medical care for inmates is quite high, I think if someone is complaining of chest pain, you should probably send them to the hospital, not back to their cell. Then, there's been a dozen or more overdoses in the jail in just the last 6 or 7 months.
Starting with this, Sheriff Farris says 90%, the overwhelming majority of Putnam County inmates are incarcerated for illegal drug activity. He says Nicole Danielle Ely is one of them and one of the women who brought the drugs inside the jail.
To summarize, the population of Putnam County has increased 13.5%, while the budget has increased 100%.
We're usually doubling our money, and so we're doing real good. And
drug crime, 200%, the inmate population, 100%, and inmate deaths and overdoses have increased Lord knows how much. Prior to his election, there were rumors that he had worked out a deal with the then sheriff, Sheriff David Andrews, who is now a county commissioner, to have input into the 2014-2015 fiscal budget. Or the sheriff's office may face an audit from the comptroller's office. Generally speaking, the outgoing sheriff sets the budget for the incoming sheriff's first year in office. And this is where our next character enters the picture. Michael Robert Ronczkowski, a.k.a. Yahoo, or, as he was known in Miami, Head. We aren't sure how he got this name, but we have some ideas. According to his LinkedIn, it was in May of 2014 that Michael Ronczkowski began working as a grant manager deputy for the Putnam County Sheriff's Office, although the details of that are fuzzy, and he may have been working originally as a volunteer. Michael Ronczkowski got his position due to his experience. There's no other way to put it. His resume is extensive. Ronczkowski authored the book, Terrorism and Organized Hate Crime. He was the chief of Homeland Security in Miami-Dade. He testified in front of Joe Lieberman and the local Law Enforcement and Counterterrorism Committee.
Major Ronczkowski, thanks for coming up representing the Homeland Security Bureau of the Miami-Dade Police Department.
Was reportedly instrumental in creating one of the nation's first fusion centers.
Most metropolitan police stations have an office called a fusion center, where classified intel is collected in one place.
He graduated from the FBI Academy, and, according to his LinkedIn, he is a board member and subject matter expert at GuideStar Technologies, whose founder boasts himself to be one of the founding fathers of big data. To put things lightly, He's way overqualified. Or is he? We did some digging, and it turns out he retired from Miami-Dade in 2010. Online law enforcement forums indicate that at the same time Ronczkowski was retiring, lots of officers in Miami-Dade were leaving the department, most of them embroiled in scandals. 12 officers were caught up moonlighting for the Panamanian National Police, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars while getting vacation pay from Miami taxpayers. They were also caught flying there on the department's dime. One Miami officer was working as a contractor and earning up to $50,000 per month, and several were caught buying themselves fancy new SUVs and other things out of the department's green fund. You may find this history pertinent by the time we're finished here today. Now, to be fair, Mike Ronczkowski is not named in the news articles about any of these matters, but online forums for law enforcement in the area indicate that he was let go during one of the scandals. Ex-coworkers have confirmed he was one of Mayor Carlos Alvarez's cronies, and Alvarez was right in the middle of all of those scandals. Ronczkowski also brags on Alvarez during his testimony in front of the Counterterrorism Committee.
This commitment is from the top down, from Director Robert Parker, Chief Ricky Smith, Mayor Carlos Alvarez. It's a buy-in that has to go across all avenues.
Along with how his branch worked closely with the FBI to stop the Liberty City 7.
Our federal partners have been exemplary. We've been part of the JTTF from the early beginning. We've been part of the Field Intelligence Group, the Department of Homeland Security, and ATF, some of which has helped us in the most recent case, what's been known as the Liberty City 7 case, where we had radicalized youth trying to go ahead and blow up the Sears Tower.
There's now been a documentary made about the Liberty City 7 and what a colossal embarrassment it became. The documentary is called In the Shadow of 9/11.
And so the government had to retry the case, and they tried it a second time, and it hung a second time.
Eventually, Ronczkowski will be promoted from grant manager to chief of administration for the Putnam County Sheriff's Office and granted control over all 6 of the department's budgets. 2015 and 2016 were pretty mundane for the Putnam County Sheriff's Office and their new sheriff, Eddie Farris. There were scandals, but for the most part, Eddie was trying to figure out how to make the best use of his newly acquired $8 million budget. He bought a bunch of new cruisers and had them decaled by the same folks that decaled his personal vehicles prior to the election, and he used Mike Ronczkowski to apply for every grant known to man. That way, they could buy more cool stuff. In short, 2015 and 2016 were just a spending spree for the sheriff's office.
And here comes Liz. She takes a big gulp of extra air. When you're team number 3 and you're trying to catch up, you have to pump yourself up.
By the end of 2017, more scandals began popping up, though many remained unnoticed. In October of that year, an off-duty paramedic was suspected of DUI, and the charge suddenly disappeared. Deputy Cameron Johnston documents that he approached the suspect's vehicle and the driver, who was an off-duty paramedic, fled on foot. The other passenger was in the back seat and was also a paramedic. There was a foot chase and the driver was caught. Suddenly, having evaded the police, bailed from their vehicle, and ran from the police on foot, now he had a seizure. The paramedic in the back seat admitted that they had both left a concert earlier that night and had been drinking at Hooligans, a local watering hole. Deputy Johnson took the report, but just a short time later filed a supplemental report and withdrew the warrant after a short discussion with the paramedic's boss. Based on the reports, it does not appear any evidence of the newly discovered medical condition was ever presented. It is believed that the charges disappeared at the behest of District Attorney Bryant Dunaway. This was also the time that the Putnam County Sheriff's Office was receiving their accreditation, which was announced in December of 2017. This accreditation would allow them to receive additional funding in the form of grants and other state and federal programs. Mike Ronczkowski's specialty. The beginning of 2018 marked the beginning of Eddie's re-election campaign. Though it seemed Eddie would once again run unopposed, there were rumors that Jimmy Patterson might also make a run for sheriff. Patterson was also trying to get hired back on at the Putnam County Sheriff's Office at the same time, and witnesses allege that Farris made an arrangement with him. If Patterson would agree not to submit a petition to run, then he would be hired on at the sheriff's office.
Quid pro quo, Mr. Powers.
Eddie once bragged to Major Terry Hembry that he was just leading Patterson on so that he didn't run against him.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
The date to turn in completed petitions came and went. Patterson never pulled his petition, nor was he ever hired. Now, remember Cameron Johnston? Well, in January of 2018, he cited a young woman for DUI. When the case finally made it to court, Johnston allegedly approached the assistant DA in an attempt to get the case thrown out, according to the ADA's written statement. When asked why, he became evasive and tried to drop his request. Now, City Judge Sean Fry, who at the time was only an attorney, was representing the young woman. He later alluded that his client may have been offered leniency in exchange for some sexual favors. The woman's case was nolli prosequi because, in the words of the judge, the prosecuting officer's employment as a law enforcement officer has been terminated related to his misconduct. However, no charges were ever filed against Johnston, and the Putnam County Sheriff's Office claims he resigned in good standing. No report was ever made to the Post Commission regarding his termination, and some say this was a case of one hand washing the other. It would be years before anyone would discover what had happened. Johnston picked up a job in Jackson County shortly after and is now reportedly back working in Overton County, once again under his favorite district attorney, Bryant Dunaway. Around 2018, Tammy Carr began working for the Putnam County Sheriff's Office in Human Resources. Her nickname? Pantyhose.
Oh, honey. You know what's happened? I've got a runner in my pantyhose. I'm not wearing pantyhose.
Tammy had worked as a rep for New York Life and had frequented the Putnam County Sheriff's Office selling insurance to deputies during their training. Now, she was in charge of handling payroll, complaints, and other human resource-related administrative work for a multi-million-dollar government entity, replacing Tiffany Phillips, who had left shortly after finance auditor Greg Rector. Inside sources allege that Rector notified Phillips that she was going to be the fall guy and blamed for some troublesome bookkeeping practices, including some issues with overtime pay. Tammy took over Tiffany's position, while Mike Ronczkowski stepped in to take Greg Rector's place. And this is when the department really began going downhill. When Tammy was hired, she was married, as was Sheriff Eddie Farris. Within a year or so, both were going through divorce. According to 4 different sources, the two were fraternizing with each other well before either divorce was finalized. They also allege that Farris entertained Tammy at his condo in Florida that at the time he co-owned with his now ex-wife. Perhaps even more troublesome, it's widely talked about inside the department that inmate labor was used on at least one occasion to move furniture and other belongings from Tammy's home during her divorce. Now, the two own property together, as well as matching sweaters. By 2018, Eddie had purchased himself his second brand new Chevy Tahoe LTZ. Several other vehicles were purchased this year also, but none stand out as much as the Ram 2500 Quad Cab, which was purchased for just under $63,000. MSRP for the truck at that time topped out at $63,295, so they didn't exactly get a deal. This truck was also outfitted with lights and sirens.
And they have to have the siren.
They have, well, yes, of course.
It's kind of like the boys and their fun toys.
Boys and toys.
Though no official reason was given, Major Terry Hembry recalls that the justification for the new truck was that it was needed for towing SWAT equipment. Members of the SWAT team and other employees of the Putnam County Sheriff's Office confirm it has never towed SWAT equipment. This truck was then given to the Chief of Administration, Mike Ronczkowski, who had only just taken over complete oversight of all 6 of the Sheriff's Office budgets.
Well, seeing you said it, I won't be bashful. We could use more funding.
Right.
Was the new truck a perk of the job? If so, why was Greg Rector only driving a minivan? Ronczkowski, according to the Post Commission, has not ever been certified as a law enforcement officer in the state of Tennessee. In May of 2019, Major Terry Hembry retired. Fast forward just a few months, and we arrive at the 2019 budget showdown. Property owners will remember this commission meeting because it resulted in a 19+ cent property tax increase. You see, it was in this meeting that Sheriff Farris was asking for part 1 of his 4-year plan.
So I sit up here, and I'm very respectful when I say this, but I sit up here and listen to what y'all are doing. And I want to remind you that all of you ask us for a 4-year plan.
Knowing that his budget might be hard to swallow for the county commission, an email went out. This email made it mandatory for deputies to show up in uniform at the county commission meeting and to sit in the audience. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think ordering dozens of officers to attend a budget meeting is a fiscally conservative use of overtime pay. This show of force was not the only important item of note in this meeting, which lasted nearly 3 hours. In this meeting, the sheriff's vehicle budget and need for school resource officers were two of the primary points of contention.
I mentioned when my motion was up earlier that I would love to work with any of the elected officials or any of the department heads. I know that the 2 SROs that the budget committee proposed was cut out of my motion and is cut out of this motion. Mike, Sheriff, can you guys help me find that money, and I'll amend this motion.
At the time, Putnam County only had SROs at about 15 of the 20 schools. Whereas no commissioner seemed to be against the SROs, there was a lot of concern that the tax base would be unable to handle an increase in SROs and an increase of an additional 4 or more vehicles. At the time, they were already getting 10 new vehicles.
And now we're down to can't pass a budget, and I'm wondering what you want to do with the schools. We went from 5 SROs to 2. Now, so how do I turn around and tell the teachers or the principal which school does not get an SRO? I don't know.
I don't know, Eddie. How about you tell them you spent nearly $70,000 on a pickup truck for your budget guy? Or how you had it outfitted with lights and a siren, even though the individual operating the truck isn't lawfully allowed to operate lights or a siren. If I had to tell teachers they weren't going to get an SRO, that's probably where I would start.
Trying to start replacing the 20.
Gotcha. I just had that question because that's generally I was in favor of Mr. Cassidy's motion earlier. The only question I had is if those 4 vehicles are absolutely not necessary this year and that can be a future need there, then that's something that...
We're already behind. We're way behind already. We're just trying to be patient with you and trying to catch up slowly. We're already behind.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
On these vehicles, they're $49,000 some odd dollars. Can we not do with something less expensive and still get the job done?
I'll let Mike came back up, but so we try to stay with one vendor, which is Ford. We've looked at the others. They're not the quality. We do our research on all the other bigger departments, Metro, Chattanooga, Knoxville. Some of the Mopar, Chrysler products do not hold up. We listen to our mechanics here in this county. They don't like them. They don't hold up. So we were going with the all-wheel drive Taurus, but they discontinued that vehicle. So now we've got to step up to the Explorer. We don't have a choice. So where we have to buy new, that's what we get. When we buy used, then we can go to the Chrysler products, and which we do for the SROs, but they're not running emergency traffic. They're at schools.
Are we buying new vehicles for the SROs?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not necessarily buying new vehicles for the SROs?
We are not buying new vehicles for the SROs. Not one SRO has a new vehicle.
It's also important to highlight that in 2019, the Putnam County Sheriff's Office obtained a new helicopter from the LESO 133 surplus program.
I got you a helicopter.
The primary use for this helicopter is intended to be drug interdiction, according to the official statement put on social media. Of course, they had to hire a pilot and find a storage hangar. They had to pay for additional training, and it almost certainly increased the cost of their insurance.
Sergeant Kyle Wiley, pilot of the helicopter, the keeping a bird-eye view on us during the parade.
Not to mention the cost of the FLIR, or the infrared radar. Oh, that's right. This drug interdiction helicopter doesn't even have one of those. But it does have decals, and the sheriff's name right on the side. The other reason the vehicle angle is so important is that many of the commissioners were sold a bill of lies. Just before this meeting, Chairman Ben Rogers, who hosted the show Trending, invited Sheriff Farris and Mike Ronczkowski to be on his show and explain the budget needs. During his interview, which was broadcast on at least 4 different radio stations, 94.1, 106.9, 93.7, 95.9, Chief of Administration Mike Ronczkowski brags about how a lot of these vehicles ran for 24 hours a day and 7 days a week.
Okay, what we've done is we've taken our vehicles, as you know, they're run 24/7, possibly 365. We started looking at national standards, trying to pare that down. We're talking strictly patrol here, and putting all the money that the commission's been nice enough to give us all towards 100% towards patrol. We've used other means through LISO, the military surplus program, to get used vehicles. They may not look pretty, may be high in mileage, but that got us by on the investigator side until we can get patrol up to speed.
Understandably, vehicles that run all the time might need to be replaced sooner, as this can cause non-typical stress. But it's a lie. You see, one of the perks to being a Putnam County deputy is getting to take your work vehicle home with you. This means that no vehicles run for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Ronczkowski's narrative took hold among the commissioners, though, and several of them parroted these lies in their justification for voting for the increased budget and increased taxes.
I just want to say, we can't cut these patrol cars out. We got to have them. We need them. Those cars run almost 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Ultimately, after watching the entire meeting, it's easy to understand how Sheriff Eddie Farris gets the reputation for being a bully. But wait, I haven't even gotten to the good parts yet.
But wait! There's more! Hang on to your seat, baby, because this one's a screamer!
In 2019, a female inmate also filed suit against the sheriff's department after she was sexually assaulted in the jail. Probably because Eddie was packing it as full as he could so he could justify his new jail purchase coming up. The female inmate was ultimately successful in her suit and received a payout. In 2020, retired Major Terry Hembry began submitting open record requests in order to debunk some of the rumors he'd heard about his previous employer. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to do much debunking, and this was when he began to truly understand that the Putnam County Sheriff's Office was betraying their own motto of earning the public's trust every day. 2 deputies were arrested for DUI, one while off duty in his private vehicle, and another while driving a patrol vehicle. Both cases were handled differently in terms of publicity and public statements, presumably because one was more favored by the sheriff. This is also when Terry Hembry began investigating the discrepancies with the Cameron Johnston ordeal. In June of 2020, The Intercept wrote an article about the Putnam County Sheriff's Office using the JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force, to preemptively investigate upstanding citizens because of a protest scheduled after the death of George Floyd. In 2021, Livingston man Robert McDaniel, while addressing an issue involving another politician in Putnam County, arrived home after handing out some flyers. Then Chief of Police for Livingston, Greg Etheridge, was waiting for him. After spending a few minutes chatting about seemingly nothing, a Putnam County Sheriff's deputy pulled up to deliver a message from Eddie Farris.
All right, youngster, out you go.
Don't come back! Ever!
You can read Bob's affidavit that he submitted in my federal lawsuit on my website. When I notified Hembry of Mr. McDaniel's affidavit, he confirmed that he too had been ordered to do something similar by Sheriff Farris during his employment, but had refused for legal and ethical reasons. In July of 2021, the County Commission also approved a $52.7 million jail expansion bond just a few months after naming the new shooting range after Eddie Farris. He was feeling like top dog. 2021 was also the year that young Joshua Bohannon went missing, which resulted in the creation of the now infamous ban list, which banned family members from even going to the sheriff's department. The banned parties were never notified of their new designation, and the list was only discovered after Terry Hembry submitted an open records request for it. When confronted about the ban list, the sheriff's attorney offered up yet another unbelievable explanation. It's not a ban list. The statement claimed that the individuals on the list need only make an appointment, though the list was entitled No Entry Ban List. In late 2021, after Hembry had finally began to question the sheriff about the Cameron Johnston scandal, he received an anonymous letter. The letter was full of intimidating rhetoric and made claims to his wife's mugshot, which doesn't exist, and basically called him a homosexual. Shortly after, a fake profile appeared mocking Terry Hembry with homophobic slurs and portraying an old driver's license photo from South Carolina as a mugshot for his wife, who had never been arrested and who had previously worked for the district attorney's office. Coincidence? The letter was mailed to his P.O. box, which was the return address on his open records request. We have since spoken to a staff member who recalls seeing the anonymous letter addressed to Hembry in the outgoing mail of the sheriff's department around that same time. Hembry reported this to the sheriff and the DA, but nothing was ever done. And remember, at this time, Cameron Johnston was not employed with the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. So who was sending the letter? In March of 2022, Joshua's remains were found, as mentioned previously, just a short distance from where friends and family had attempted to organize a search party, but had been turned down by the sheriff. When he took to social media to brag about how good of a job he'd done, lots of people chimed in to correct him and were subsequently blocked. And this is where I first became aware that there were any issues in Putnam County. This is also when several fake profiles started harassing others who were raising similar concerns, including Eric Hammock, who worked in law enforcement in Overton County in the early 2000s. The fake profiles attempted to post Eric's address online as a means to scare him, but fortunately, he had recently moved. I was blocked and harassed at the end of March of 2022, and because I was blocked, I did not immediately become aware of what happened next. In June of 2022, Greg Etheridge, the chief of Livingston Police Department, resigned after $27,000 was discovered as missing by the comptroller.
Officials launching an investigation within the Livingston Police Department. The state comptroller's office and TBI saying at least $27,000 in seized cash is missing. Both the custodian and former captain telling officials they had borrowed the cash for personal purchases at the time. Investigators also say the department's drug fund was misused. That's after the police chief deposited more than $350,000 derived from the sale of police vehicles. Investigators also saying the chief illegally received over $41,000 in reimbursements.
Not to worry, though, because shortly after he resigned from Livingston, he was hired by Sheriff Eddie Farris. Our sources tell us that the missing $27,000 was not the only issue with the evidence locker. Personal items being stored with evidence, taking things out of evidence and giving them to trustees, and even untagged firearms were among the things witnessed by our sources. If you or someone you know has pending criminal case where evidence has been stored in Livingston, I'd suggest notifying your attorney of this. You could get out of it because of a chain of custody issue. On October 21st, 2022, members of the Cookeville Police Department, as part of a drug enforcement operation, raided Power Athletics Tumbling Gymnasium off of Interstate Drive. Owner of the establishment, Justin Henry, was also the assistant cheerleading coach for the local high school. This was not a weightlifting gym. Shortly after this raid, Jasmine Woodson, a conservative activist from the area, made a post asking why no one was talking about the bust.
Came across a post written by a girl I went to high school with. She was talking about a kid's gym being busted for steroids and the sheriff possibly being involved. Seeing that her post didn't have a lot of traction, I decided to make a post and ask, why isn't anyone talking about the Power Athletics situation, which then kind of opened the floodgates.
Jasmine alleges that her friend had tried to discuss it on Facebook, but that the sheriff himself called her and then came to her work to get her friend to remove the post. Several commenters on Jasmine's post also expressed that Eddie Farris was somehow involved, and this prompted Jasmine to get her own visit. Instead of making his own house call like he had for her friend, 2 deputies arrived at Jasmine's home on or around November 2nd, 2022, to serve an arrest warrant on her ex, who she had not seen in over 2 years. Later that same night, a fake social media profile, complete with an old mugshot of her ex, was on the internet, tagging Jasmine's employer in a post, attempting to get her fired. Fortunately, they were not swayed by the fake profile, Glowworm. We have since spoken with Jasmine's friend, who originally posted on the internet about the bust. She told us that not only had Eddie shown up to her work, but that she was pulled over afterward and followed multiple times. She has since started working from home and does not leave her house after dark if she can help it for fear of further retaliation. During this very same week, 15-year-old Olivia Taylor was reported missing. The next day, her body was found, and 63-year-old Charles Chuck Carter was arrested for statutory rape of the young girl. By October 31st, Carter was charged with second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse after supplying Olivia with the drugs which ultimately led to her demise. Why are these 2 stories important? Well, through 4 independent sources within law enforcement whose names we cannot reveal, we learned that the steroid bust at Power Athletics involved a large amount of anabolic steroids, as well as equipment used in the sale and manufacture of said drugs. We've also learned that a phone call was made by the gym owner to Sheriff Eddie Farris, and that the officer who was meant to seize the phone at the scene didn't. Officer Jamie McCurry is not only Sheriff Eddie's next-door neighbor, but his wife, Adrienne McCurry, works for Eddie on one of his task forces, the JTTF. Remember the Intercept article? Jamie McCurry has since been moved to patrol with Cookeville PD and is no longer working on the drug task force, presumably because he failed to process Henry's phone correctly. Coupled with what we have learned regarding the steroid investigation that was shut down a decade prior, we feel this raises serious cause for alarm and quite easily explains why 2 citizens received visits from law enforcement officers when talking about this bust on social media. As for Charles Carter, Terry Hembry and several other officers confirmed that Charles Chuck Carter Jr. had been an informant for the Putnam County Sheriff's Office for quite some time. Eddie and Chuck were Facebook friends, and 2 separate law enforcement officers confirmed that Carter was treated differently than most career criminals because of his narc status. Officers recalled frequenting the Carter residence to investigate drugs, serve warrants, and even as a place of interest in rape allegations. Yet somehow, the information this man provided was worth allowing him to remain on the streets, until it resulted in the death of a 15-year-old girl. Only then was the issue important enough to lock him up. In December of 2022, I had Eddie served with my federal lawsuit. Service occurred at the December 19th County Commission meeting, 1 year from the date of this release.
You have been served.
Happy anniversary, Eddie. Around this time, I also went on the radio, which was how I became connected with Terry Hembry. In January of 2023, I was once again harassed by a fake profile. More than one, actually. One of these fake profiles even made good on the threats made by JT Hill 9 months prior and contacted my local mayor, alderman, and my local city administrator to report me for not paying my taxes, which I do pay. When I sent this Mike A. Rice 88 a cease and desist, they responded by telling me not to poke bears, or people that I cared about could get bit. Then, one of the fake profiles took issue with a commenter's definition of terrorism, calling it incomplete. Now, who do we know who's an expert on terrorism?
Yahoo!
I thank 99.7 WTN for giving me the opportunity to get my message out. Without that little bit of help, who knows where we would be today. Later that same month, I met up with Jasmine and Terry and interviewed them both about their experiences. I was also contacted by members of the ban list and discovered that one of the people who was banned was not even a real person, but an alias only used on the internet. This demonstrates that the ban list was nothing more than a political tactic used to target people for things that they said on the internet. And it also raises questions about the response time these people would have been given should they have required assistance from the sheriff's department. In March, there was the gas station group, where 3 off-duty law enforcement officers were leaving a party at Greg Etheridge's home and caused a disturbance in the parking lot of a Livingston gas station. One of these deputies was Mia Godinez. Mia was a young officer who had been previously terminated from the Lebanon Police Department for conduct unbecoming after an issue arose between herself, her field training officer, and her field training officer's wife. Instead of seeing her employment history and taking the young deputy under his wing, little Eddie threw her to the wolves. Ultimately, Mia would resign in 2023 after being involved in an automobile accident while under the influence. Body camera and dash camera footage has been requested to confirm other rumors, but at this time, the case is still pending a decision and the footage has not been released. One of the other officers involved in this instance was Zachary Glover, who was reprimanded by Monterey Police Department. But when I originally requested the document proving such, it had not been placed in his file yet. We have since obtained a copy of that reprimand, and miraculously, it doesn't have a date on it, leading us to believe that it was removed specifically for my original request. Video of the gas station group is said to exist, and to be quite entertaining. But in an effort to keep the recording from becoming public record, it seems that no one obtained a copy of the video, though we know someone has it, and we'd love to see it. Oh, and a bunch of deputies caught the clap, too.
All the sailors had their meat and 2 veg painted gold.
In April of 2023, a young woman was arrested on a warrant for Legend drugs. Legend drugs are not recognized under a current schedule status, but still require a prescription. The arrest came after she had voluntarily come to speak with the investigators to bring them information she felt was relevant to an ongoing missing persons investigation. During the interview, Adrienne McCurry, also Eddie's next-door neighbor and wife of Jamie McCurry, indicated that the young woman's posts on social media criticizing the department were taken personal.
When you post things about the Putnam County Sheriff's Office and their investigation into the disappearance and death, that is me.
Whether you feel the woman should have been charged for such a petty crime when trying to help the police and cooperate is one thing, but we can all agree that there was no need to make a press release on the matter. The only explanation is that the sheriff's department wanted to get back at her because of the way she had spoken about the department on social media. Sound familiar? This isn't the only time in 2023 that public humiliation was used to bolster the sheriff's ego. Another individual discovered that they had an outstanding warrant from years ago while returning from a trip out of the country. They no longer lived in Putnam County and called to make arrangements with the sheriff's office to turn themselves in. After making these arrangements, but before the agreed upon date, the sheriff's office featured this individual on their new Warrant Wednesday and on a billboard. This made it appear that the individual was a fugitive hiding from justice and not an upstanding citizen just trying to make arrangements to do the right thing. Again, bullying folks for political gain. When the individual turned themselves in, the sheriff's department reported them as captured, again giving the appearance that they had been a fugitive on the lam. In September, I was sent writing samples from an individual I was told was behind the fake accounts and the anonymous letter to Terry Hembry. When comparing hundreds of writing samples, social media posts, and letters drafted by this said individual, it became quite obvious that the writing styles and patterns were the same. Space, space. I started asking around, and that is when I met another insider. This insider confirmed to me that they were the one ordered to run my name through the CLEAR database, a law enforcement system that can only be used for genuine law enforcement reasons. I have not had any dealings with law enforcement in Putnam County, and finally knew how the fake profile had access to that information only known to police. The insider identified Michael Robert Ronczkowski. There are lots of other scandals that I have uncovered, including numerous accusations that little Eddie tipped some people off during Operation Tarnish Shield. This is very possible in our opinion, after we discovered that Eddie was one of the investigators leading Operation Tarnish Shield, and considering everything else we've learned. The special agent over Operation Tarnish Shield was Bart Brown. Bart Brown is also how Eddie scored his private security gigs with big names like Eric Holder, Marsha Blackburn, and Bill Haggerty. And perhaps those relationships are why we can't get anyone to take action. I've also uncovered accusations that Greg Rector had expressed serious concerns about the legal ramifications of an audit into the Putnam County Sheriff's Office finances. No surprise there. I've heard accusations that overtime reimbursement by the feds is being abused, rental agreements for unneeded offices with longtime financial supporters, improper cash handling procedures as it relates to evidence, a missing computer with child porn on it, a stolen Sheriff's Department AR-15 which was recovered in the possession of less than upstanding individuals, and a massive payout after a ransomware attack on the Sheriff's Department after somebody clicked on a link they shouldn't have. There are loads of issues throughout the 13th District where bad officers are either not being reported to the Post Commission or they are being hired on even though they have a bad history. And most of these officers wind up in Little Eddie's inner circle. Then there's Mike Ronczkowski's guest appearance on the YouTube channel, Whistlin' Diesel.
Film your fucking cameras, shove it up your ass, motherfucker. Look at me, I got fucking YouTube.
What's more, there are also internal sign-up sheets for promotions signed by people who at the time were not even employed at the department, which is likely part of keeping their accreditation so that they can continue to have access to all of these special grant programs and other funding sources. After all, just before I published this, I discovered that the Sheriff's Department command staff just got 3 new 4-wheel drive Ford F-150s, because carrying the burden of working for Eddie definitely requires something with a towing capacity. There's so many more small tangents that we could break off into, but I think you get the picture. If the Putnam County Sheriff's Department were a business, Sheriff Farris would have been fired a long time ago. Instead, it's a government department that has been given virtually unlimited power and no accountability. So who do you go to? Between myself and a dozen others, most of these issues have been told to just about everyone. Local media? Yeah, good luck with that. Even Phil Williams won't report on the files employees gave him a few years ago. The district attorney, Bryant, do nothing, done away? Yeah, he's been notified a plethora of times by several individuals about most of these issues, and he's ignored it. State Reps Ryan Williams or Ed Butler, yeah, they ignored it. Senators Paul Bailey and Ken Yeager, ignored it. Governor Lee, ignored it. Haggerty and his staff, ignored it. Marsha Blackburn, ignored it. The TBI, ignored it. Administrative Office of the Courts, ignored it. Comptroller's Office, ignored it. Jonathan Scrimetti, ignored it. U.S. Attorney's Office, well, they said contact the FBI. The FBI, ignored it. My local police department, ignored it. My local DA's office, ignored it. Putnam County Commissioners, well, mark my words, some of them have plenty of knowledge. I'd bet some of them were even victims, or at minimum, knew that they had to support Farris or they might become victims. I could go on, but I think you get the picture. So what will be done? Nothing until the public is outraged. Inmate deaths, steroids, murdered children, and higher taxes. Welcome to Putnam County, Tennessee.
That's mind-blowing to me.
I want to thank everyone who has helped me uncover this information. The 12 current and former law enforcement officers who provided valuable information and insight, the 30-plus members of the Putnam County community who helped me collect this information over the last 21 months, WTN for giving me a platform to speak, which led to me meeting the hero of this story, Terry Hembry. Without him, none of this would have ever been uncovered. Never be afraid to stand up, because sometimes you can be the start of something larger than yourself. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to subscribe to my channel, hit the thumbs up button, drop a comment, and share it with your friends. And if you're in a position, send a little tip our way at patriotpunknetwork.com/support.